Montana Territory, 1873. The unforgiving sun beat down on Hope Bannister's back as she hoisted another log onto the growing wall of her cabin. At 22, she possessed a determination that matched the harsh landscape around her. Sweat beaded on her forehead, running in rivulets down her temple and into her loose blonde braid that hung over her shoulder. Her blue cotton dress, once vibrant, had faded to a dusty hue that matched the Montana sky in late summer. A mile away, Finley Zachary watched from his horse. At 26, his youthful face betrayed the old grief in his eyes. The wind rustled his light brown hair as he observed the woman's methodical work. His lean frame sat easily in the saddle, a testament to years of working cattle. 3 days he'd been watching her, and 3 days he'd told himself to keep riding. Nothing good came from getting attached out here. His wife Emily had taught him that lesson 2 years ago when childbirth had claimed both her and their infant son in one cruel stroke. The frontier had no mercy for dreamers or those who dared to love. That's what Finley had learned. Stay moving, stay alone, stay alive. The Montana Territory didn't care about a man's heart. It only respected strength and solitude. Family men were vulnerable men, and vulnerable men ended up with fresh graves to dig. Yet something about the woman's stubborn perseverance kept drawing him back to this ridge overlooking her homestead. Day after day, she worked alone, placing log upon log with a tenacity that both impressed and bewildered him. What was a woman like her doing out here alone? Whatever her reason, it was none of his business. He'd be moving on soon, back to the anonymity of the cattle drives and bunkhouses where a man could keep his ghosts to himself. Finley turned his horse to leave when he heard it. A sharp crack followed by a cry of pain. He whipped around to see the woman pinned beneath a heavy log that had rolled from its position. Without conscious thought, he was spurring his horse down the hillside, dust kicking up behind them. Hope had been so focused on fitting the notch of the log just right that she hadn't noticed it shifting. Now it pressed against her leg with crushing weight, and no matter how she pushed, she couldn't free herself. The nearest neighbor was miles away. Panic rose in her throat as she realized the dire situation she was in. The sound of galloping hooves made her look up. A man she'd never seen before was racing toward her property, his face set in grim determination. In seconds, he had dismounted and was beside her. "Don't move," he ordered, his voice surprisingly gentle despite the command. "I'm going to lift this off you." Hope watched as the stranger braced himself, muscles tensing beneath his faded blue shirt. With a grunt of effort, he managed to lift the log just enough for her to scramble free. The relief was immediate, though pain still throbbed in her leg. "Thank you," she gasped, looking up at her rescuer properly for the first time. He was younger than she'd first thought, with clear green eyes that contrasted with his sun-browned skin. A light stubble shadowed his jaw, and despite the seriousness of his expression, there was something kind in the way he looked at her. "You're welcome," he replied, stepping back as if suddenly aware of how close they were standing. That was a heavy piece to be managing alone. "I've managed fine until now," Hope said, a defensive edge creeping into her voice. "I'm building this cabin by myself." "I can see that," Finley replied, glancing at the half-constructed walls. "It's good work, but maybe not the kind meant for one person alone." Hope straightened, wincing as she put weight on her injured leg. "Everything out here is meant for one person alone, Mr. Zachary." Finley Zachary. He offered no hand to shake, keeping a respectful distance. "And you might be right about the frontier, but even the most stubborn wolves run in packs sometimes." "Hope Bannister," she replied, then frowned suddenly. "Have you been watching me? I thought I felt eyes on me these past few days." Finley had the decency to look embarrassed. "I was passing through. Saw you working. It's not common to see a woman building a homestead alone. My father died 6 months ago," Hope explained, her voice flat. "The land is mine now, and I aim to keep it. No one else is going to build this cabin for me." Something in her determination resonated with Finley, though he knew better than to say so. Instead, he nodded toward her leg. "You should rest that. And wrap it tight. I can help you inside your—" He looked around at the unfinished structure and the small tent pitched nearby. "My tent will do fine," Hope said firmly. "And I appreciate your help, Mr. Zachary, but I can manage from here." Finley recognized dismissal when he heard it. Part of him was relieved. Attachment was dangerous out here. But another part, one he thought had died with Emily, felt a strange reluctance to leave this fiercely independent woman to her solitary task. "At least let me help with that log," he said, gesturing to the fallen timber. "It's the least I can do before I move on." Hope hesitated, pride warring with practicality. Finally, she nodded. "Just that log. Then you can be on your way." One log turned into two. Two became four. By sunset, Finley had helped Hope add an entire new row to her cabin walls. They worked mostly in silence, each respecting the other's obvious desire for minimal conversation. But something shifted between them in those hours of shared labor. A grudging respect, perhaps, or recognition of a kindred spirit. As Finley prepared to leave, Hope surprised him with an offer. "There's stew enough for two, if you'd like to eat before you go." It wasn't much of an invitation, but on the frontier, such gestures weren't made lightly. Finley found himself accepting before he could reconsider. That night, sitting by Hope's campfire, Finley broke his own rule about never asking personal questions. "Why are you so determined to stay here alone? Most women would have sold the land or found a husband to help." Hope's blue eyes reflected the firelight as she considered her answer. "My father brought us here when I was 16. My mother died on the journey. He poured everything he had into this land, and I watched him work himself to death for it." She paused, stirring the stew. "I won't dishonor that by giving up or giving it away to the first man who offers marriage." "And what about the dangers?" Finley pressed. "Indians, outlaws, winter storms. What about them?" Hope interrupted. "Do you think I haven't faced danger before? The frontier doesn't care if you're a man or woman when it tries to kill you." She handed him a bowl of stew. "The only difference is, men get to face it together in groups, while women are expected to find a protector or perish." Finley took the bowl, their fingers brushing momentarily. "I wasn't suggesting you're incapable, weren't you?" Hope challenged, but there was no real anger in her voice. Only the weary patience of someone who'd had this conversation too many times before. They ate in silence for a while before Finley spoke again. "I was married once," he said, the words leaving his mouth before he could stop them. 2 years ago. Emily was her name. She died in childbirth, along with our son." Hope's expression softened. "I'm sorry." Finley nodded, uncomfortable with her sympathy. "I learned my lesson. The frontier's no place for family dreams. Only fools try to build something permanent out here." "Then I must be the biggest fool in Montana territory," Hope replied, gesturing to her half-built cabin. That night, Finley slept under the stars near Hope's camp, telling himself it was only to ensure her safety after the injury. In the morning, he would ride on as planned. No attachments, no complications. That was the only way to survive. But when dawn broke, Finley found himself helping Hope with the cabin again. Just for the day, he told himself. Just to make sure she doesn't injure herself worse. One day stretched into three. 3 became a week. They fell into an unexpected rhythm, working side by side during daylight hours, sharing quiet meals in the evening. Hope's initial wariness gradually gave way to a cautious acceptance of his help. For his part, Finley told himself each morning would be his last on her property, yet somehow he couldn't bring himself to leave. "Why are you still here?" Hope asked bluntly one evening as they sat by the fire, the cabin walls now chest-high around them. Finley stared into the flames. "I don't know," he admitted. It was the first honest thing he'd said in a long time. "You're running from something," Hope observed. Not a question, but a statement. "Aren't we all?" he countered. Hope shook her head. "I'm not running. I'm standing my ground." "Maybe that's braver than what most of us do," Finley said quietly. The next morning, as they worked on the roof supports, a dust cloud on the horizon announced visitors long before they arrived. 3 riders approached, their manner casual but their eyes sharp and assessing as they took in the cabin, Hope and Finley. "Morning, ma'am," the lead rider called, tipping his hat. His polite words didn't match the calculating look in his eyes. "Fine piece of property you're building on." "It's my property," Hope replied evenly, her hand drifting to the rifle that was never far from reach. "That's so." The man smiled, showing tobacco-stained teeth. "Funny thing is, my boss Mr. Caldwell seems to think this parcel belongs to the Triple C Ranch. Says he bought it fair and square from a fellow named Bannister." Hope's face paled, but her voice remained steady. "My father never sold this land. I have the deed to prove it." The rider shrugged. "Papers can say all sorts of things, ma'am. But Mr. Caldwell's got papers too, and he's got the county clerk backing his claim." His eyes shifted to Finley. "This your husband?" Before Hope could answer, Finley stepped forward. "The lady told you this is her land. I suggest you take that message back to your boss." "And who might you be?" the rider asked, his hand resting casually near his holstered pistol. "Someone who doesn't appreciate threats against a homesteader," Finley replied, his own posture deceptively relaxed despite the tension humming through him. The lead rider studied him for a moment, then smiled unpleasantly. "No threats here, friend. Just passing along a message. Mr. Caldwell gives you 1 week to clear out, or his next message won't be so friendly." He tipped his hat again. "Good day to you both." As the riders departed, Hope turned to Finley, her face a mask of controlled fury. "My father would never have sold this land. Never." "I believe you," Finley said, watching the retreating figures. "But belief won't stop Caldwell if he's determined." "Neither will running," Hope replied firmly. "This is my home. I won't be driven from it." That night, Hope showed Finley her father's strongbox, containing the original deed to the property and his journal documenting years of work on the land. He was approached many times about selling, she explained, turning pages of the journal, especially after he fell ill. But he always refused. Finley examined the deed carefully. "This looks legitimate to me. But if Caldwell has the county clerk in his pocket, then the law won't help me," Hope finished. "I know how these things work. Rich ranchers like Caldwell take what they want, and people like me are expected to move on quietly." Finley looked at her, really looked at her. The determination in her blue eyes, the stubborn set of her jaw, the calluses on her hands from building her dream log by log. Something stirred in him, something he thought had died with Emily. "You're not alone in this," he said quietly. Hope's eyes met his, searching. "Why would you stay? This isn't your fight." Finley had no answer that made sense, even to himself. He only knew that the thought of riding away now felt impossible. The next morning, Finley rode into town to gather information about Caldwell and his C ranch. What he discovered troubled him deeply. 3 previous homesteaders had been forced from their claims under suspicious circumstances, all their land eventually absorbed into Caldwell's growing empire. The county clerk, a nervous man named Wilson, evaded Finley's questions about land records, his eyes darting constantly to the saloon across the street where 2 of Caldwell's men were watching. More concerning was what Finley overheard in that same saloon later. Caldwell wasn't planning to wait a week. He was sending men to burn Hope out in 2 days' time. Finley rode hard back to Hope's homestead, pushing his horse to its limits. He found her on the roof of the cabin, hammering shingles into place with the same determination she brought to everything. "We have a problem," he called up to her. "Caldwell's men are coming. Day after tomorrow." Hope climbed down, her face grim but unsurprised. "To talk again?" "To burn you out," Finley replied bluntly. "We need to prepare." They worked through the night, not on the cabin now, but on defenses. Finley dug rifle pits at strategic points, while Hope prepared food and ammunition. Neither spoke of the possibility of her leaving, of surrendering the land. That option existed only in theory, not in Hope Bannister's reality. As dawn broke, Hope paused in her preparations. "You could still ride out, Finley. This isn't your fight." Finley looked at the cabin they'd built together, at the woman who had somehow broken through his vow of detachment. "Maybe it is my fight. Maybe I'm tired of running." Hope studied his face in the early light. "You never told me what you were running from." Finley's throat tightened. "From remembering. From feeling anything that could be taken away again." Hope's hand found his, rough skin against rough skin. "And now I'm more afraid of riding away than staying," he admitted. That afternoon, as they continued their preparations, dust on the horizon announced riders coming much sooner than expected. But these weren't Caldwell's men. It was the sheriff, accompanied by the county clerk Wilson and another man in an expensive suit. "Miss Bannister," the sheriff called as they approached. "I need to speak with you about this property dispute." Hope stood her ground, rifle visible but not aimed. "There is no dispute, Sheriff. This is my land." The well-dressed man dismounted. "Miss Bannister, I'm Judge Harrison from Helena. May we speak privately?" Inside the half-finished cabin, Judge Harrison examined Hope's deed and her father's journal. His face grew increasingly troubled as he read. "Miss Bannister, the deed Caldwell presented to the court is a forgery," he finally said. "A good one, but a forgery nonetheless. Your father's signature doesn't match county records." Hope's knuckles whitened around her father's journal. I told you he never sold. Indeed, the judge agreed. And Mr. Wilson here has something to add. He nodded to the nervous clerk. Wilson cleared his throat. I was persuaded to validate Caldwell's claim, he admitted. But when Mr. Zachary came asking questions yesterday, I realized things had gone too far. I contacted Judge Harrison. Caldwell doesn't know we're here, the sheriff added. But his men will be coming, just as your friend discovered. Then what do you propose to do about it? Finley asked, his voice hard. We set a trap, the judge replied simply. When Caldwell's men arrived the following day, 6 riders armed with rifles and coal oil for burning. They found Hope alone, seemingly working on her cabin. Time's up, woman, the lead rider called, the same man who had delivered the original warning. This is your last chance to leave with your life. Hope straightened, facing them without fear. This is my land. I'm not going anywhere. Have it your way. The man snarled, reaching for his rifle. Before he could aim, the sheriff's voice rang out from behind the cabin. Drop your weapons. You're all under arrest. What followed was brief, but chaotic. 2 of Caldwell's men surrendered immediately. 3 tried to flee and were quickly captured by deputies positioned in the woods. The leader drew on the sheriff, but never got off a shot. Finley's bullet caught him in the shoulder from his hidden position in the rifle pit. By nightfall, Caldwell himself had been arrested in town, his land-grabbing scheme exposed by Wilson's testimony and the judge's authority. Hope's property was secure, legally recognized beyond any challenge. As the sheriff and his prisoners departed, Judge Harrison lingered. You've shown remarkable courage, Miss Bannister, he said. But may I offer some advice? The frontier is changing. The days of lone homesteaders are numbered. Communities survive where individuals often fail. Hope looked at Finley, something unspoken passing between them. I'm beginning to understand that, Your Honor. That night, with danger past and the future suddenly wide open before them, Hope and Finley sat by the fire in comfortable silence. The cabin walls surrounded them, solid and real, a testament to shared labor and unexpected connection. What will you do now? Hope finally asked. Continue wandering? Finley looked at her, really looked at her. The strength in her, the determination, the life. I've been thinking about that, he said slowly. I've been running for 2 years, telling myself that loving someone out here is a fool's gamble. And now? Hope asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Now I wonder if the real foolishness was in running at all. He took a deep breath. Hope, I know this is sudden. We've only known each other a short while. But I haven't felt alive since Emily died until I saw you building this cabin, log by log, refusing to give up what matters to you. Hope's eyes shone in the firelight. What are you saying, Finley? I'm saying I don't want to leave, he admitted. Not tomorrow, not ever. I'm saying that maybe, if you're willing, we could build something here together. Not just a cabin, but a life. Hope was silent for a long moment, her expression unreadable. When my father died, she finally said, I promised myself I wouldn't need anyone, that I could face this frontier alone and win. Finley nodded, bracing himself for rejection. But these past weeks have taught me something, she continued. Strength isn't about standing alone. It's about choosing who to stand with. Her hand found his across the space between them. I would be honored to build a life with you, Finley Zachary. The following spring, Hope and Finley Zachary stood on the porch of their completed cabin, watching as green crept back into the Montana landscape. Behind them, the sturdy log walls sheltered not just their belongings but their hopes for the future. A small garden was taking shape nearby, and in the corral, a mare had recently foaled, the beginning of what would someday be a respectable horse ranch. Any regrets? Finley asked, his arm around his wife's waist. Hope leaned into him, her hand resting protectively over the slight swell of her belly. Their first child, due in autumn. Not one, she replied. You? Finley looked out at the land they had defended together, at the life they were building log by log, day by day. Only that I wasted 2 years running from exactly what I needed. Hope smiled up at him. You weren't running, Finley. You were just taking the long way home. As the sun set over their homestead, casting long shadows from the cabin they'd built with their own hands, Hope and Finley Zachary stood not as 2 solitary figures against the frontier, but as a family, proof that even in the harshest landscapes, love could not only survive but flourish. The Montana Territory would never be an easy place, but they would face whatever came together. Log by log, day by day, they would build their future, stronger together than either could ever have been alone.